For some reason, he got a tremble over that. Then I caught him giving me all these ugly black looks as if he was itching to knife me in the back. I guessed it had something to do with Gertrude, but I didn't know what. Well, this one day, we was trying to work our way through a dripping black.
I've done a lot of things. Most of it confidential. Most of it classified. If you can name something done in the name of covert operations, I've probably done it. For many of those years, though, I've worked for a discrete branch of the government that simply goes by division. Division is basically an umbrella that encompasses a wide variety of different operations. The largest, however, is the research and development section of division, mainly working to covertly experiment and create biological weapons and viruses. I was never truly involved in that sector of division until recently. I mainly did what others in my field would consider grunt work, but I did it well. Armed escort, documentation retrieval, interrogation, intimidation. Not necessarily glamorous by any means, but satisfying in its own way. And I prided myself on being discreet, professional. Even in my younger days, when I used to run with a more rough and tumble kind of gang, I still managed to develop my professionalism in that line of work. When my friend Mac was killed during a meeting and pickup gone wrong, I knew it was time to get out of hitting for gangs and find a more stable gig, which led me to the PMC Briar Patch, which was later dissolved and acquired by the division as their own security and deployment force. Essentially, something went wrong at one of the covert R&D facilities. They were attempting to manufacture a biological weapon. Something ended up getting contaminated and a disease was beginning to spread in the surrounding area. Nasty stuff, too. Apparently, it was something you'd see out of a zombie movie. I didn't have all the details, but I knew it was bad. But as long as the spread was contained, things would be fine. Our team's job wasn't containment, though. It was retrieval. When everything went down, Division remotely deleted the servers at the R&D lab. Obviously, they wouldn't want anyone to know what was being worked on. However, even in the age as digital as this one, there were countless hard copies and paper files detailing experimentation info, observation from clinical trials, medical research on various weaponized viruses, toxins, and diseases. We had to retrieve what we could and torch the rest. The entire facility was to be destroyed. We were given very little information regarding the nature of the virus or those infected. All we were told was that it was a highly contagious virus that can be transferred via exchange of bodily fluids through contact. It is highly destructive to the organs and brain of the affected, and to treat any infected is hostile and eliminate on sight. A little perturbing, but simple enough. To be honest, it had been about 48 hours since containment was broken, so I really wasn't expecting to run into any infected at the lab. It was my understanding that the virus would quickly kill any infected. I was wrong. We deployed a team to the lab. It was a 3-man team. A man who went by the name of Trout, a woman named Lizzie who had the combat skills we had but also had medical knowledge, valuable to have in a situation like this. And myself, codename Rabbit because of my time spent working for Briar Patch back in the day. We also had some basic hazardous material protective suits so as not to get infected, should there be any traces of the virus left in the facility. We made our way into the facility, designated as Lab Z. It was underground with only one main above-ground entrance. Most of the lights were still on, but you could tell that something happened here. Something more than a simple containment breach. It looked like there had been an attack. Furniture was overturned, equipment was destroyed, objects strewn about. And this was just in the first few areas. The files we were looking for were much deeper into the facility. And it didn't take long before we started coming across bodies. And those, well, we weren't expecting what we saw. The bodies on the ground were completely mutilated. Some looked like their whole throats were ripped out, faces contorted into a scream for their final moments. It looked like a horrifying way to go. Other bodies looked as if something had fed off their guts, stomachs gaping open, oozing blood and black pus. Something was very wrong here. I spoke quietly with Trout and Lizzie. Trout said, "Something is off. What kind of a virus does this?" We agreed, but the mission was the mission. I still had a creeping feeling that Division had a much clearer picture of what they were sending us into than we did. Yet we kept moving forward, toward the records area of the facility. This area was dimly lit. The power on this side of the building was off. We switched on our flashlights and continued moving. "Should have brought NVGs," Lizzie said. "Should have brought more people," was my thought. But I kept it to myself. It was right around that time that we started to hear noises. It was faint, but audible. I looked back at the rest of the team. I could tell they heard it too. But we kept moving. As we did, we made our way down the long, narrow corridor flanked on either side by exam and testing rooms. The snarling and growling sounds got more and more intense, more distinguishable from the ambient noises of the lab. When we were about 50 feet to the entrance of the records area, I heard Trout whisper, "Look." At once we pointed our flashlights down the corridor in unison, and we spotted the silhouette of a person standing somewhat behind one of the large filing cabinets. We glanced at each other, somewhat nervously, but moved forward. "Sir," I said loudly. "Sir, are you okay?" We approached slowly, the man's figure heaving up and down as if he was taking large breaths. We slowly approached the figure from behind, me still trying to get his attention. "Sir." All of a sudden the figure whirled around. All three of us lifted our weapons at the figure's head. "Thank goodness," he said, wheezing. "You gotta get me out of here. One of those things attacked me and I was barely able to..." A gunshot rang out in the small corridor. I turned to see the smoke from Trout's rifle dissipating. "Jesus, man, what the hell did you do that for?" I yelled at him as the lab tech crumpled to the ground. "Orders are no infected survive. He was attacked. Means he was infected," Trout said coldly. He was right. I grunted out of frustration and was about to push the door to the records room open when I stopped. The snarling and growling noises had ceased. It was now eerily quiet in the corridor, save for one noise. A new noise. Footsteps. A lot of them. I shined my flashlight down the hall we just came down. I saw movement. A lot of movement. Shadowy figures moving down the hall at quite a pace towards us. "Time to go," I said. "Into the records room, everyone." I opened the door and Lizzie entered. I beckoned for Trout to go in next, but before he could, all of a sudden something appeared at the door of the exam room behind him and grabbed him. I lifted my gun and my light to see what was happening, and it was... I've never seen something like that before. This thing, it looked like a man, but its eyes were deep and sunken, almost black. There were open sores, oozing black pus. Its skin looked like it was melting off the bones. These were the things headed toward us from down the hall. Its jaw opened unnaturally wide as it grabbed Trout in its arms. I could tell, just by how easily it knocked him around, how strong this thing was. Unnaturally strong. Its jaw ripped right through the hazmat suit. Trout screamed and fired off his gun multiple times, bullets ricocheting off the metallic walls. I was lucky I wasn't hit. Blood began spraying everywhere. I tried to find a shot to take down the creature, but I couldn't. And Trout was screaming in pain. "I'm sorry," I whispered under my breath as I took aim, and shot Trout in the head, killing him. The creature, startled, recoiled and disappeared into the blackness of the corridor. Trout was a good soldier. I had done a few operations with him in the past. He didn't deserve to go out like that. I quickly ducked into the records room. Lizzie was shaking, gun still at the ready. She had seen it all, just like I had. "We need to barricade the door." We tipped over cabinets and moved furniture and chairs against the door. I honestly didn't know how long that would keep those things out. But that was a problem to solve in a little bit. For now, there was an objective to complete. We searched in silence for any records pertaining to the virus. I found a few marked with a recent date and the title VIX-69. I flipped through. This looked like one of the files. "Over here, check this out." Lizzie pulled a large box from under one of the counters. "Cassette tapes?" There was a slamming and scratching at the door. The barricade we built buckled with every bump. I plucked one of the cassette tapes out of the box. Lizzie, who had been digging around in the box, found an old player and popped it in.
Were exposed to the subject, a likely infection. We've quarantined them, but they've already had contact with other unprotected men.
Sorry, Doctor, but that's not a good idea. There's still a whole lot of paperwork and red tape that we have to get through to explain the previous incident.
Yes, so what exactly is being tested? I had a feeling it was some kind of
I stopped the tape. "Grab as many as you can. It's time to leave." We scooped up as many tapes as we could and began searching for a way out. If we could just exit the room somehow, we could get behind the group of infected and make our way out of the facility. We searched and searched, but couldn't find a way. Until I spotted a ventilation duct after moving one of the ceiling tiles. It would be tight, but I knew at the very least Lizzie would be able to fit. "You have to go," I said. "Take the files and the tapes. Go through the duct, get behind the infected, and get out of here. And blow the entrance to this place so nothing else gets in or out. She told me no, she wasn't leaving me alone, and we'd find a way out. But I already knew there were no other options. I said to her, "This is my OP, and I'm telling you to go. I'll make sure those things are distracted." I heard her curse me under her breath, but she finally gave me one final salute before removing her hazmat suit, grabbing the files and tapes, and disappearing into the duct. Quite a dramatic end to what has already been a pretty dramatic life. As the barricade began to break down, and I saw the first couple of glimpses of those things entering the room, I hoped that this was contained in time. I hoped that Lizzie made it out, and that research could be used to fabricate a cure. I hoped that this virus was created and would die in this lab. Because if not, well, we were in for something even worse than what happened in 2020. The room shook from an explosion at the entrance to the lab as the final pieces of the barricade were knocked down. As the infected creatures burst into the room snarling and bleeding, I lifted my rifle for one final time.
Knife me in the back. I guessed it had something to do with Gertrude, but I didn't know what. Well, this one day we was trying to work our way through a dripping black fog. You scarcely know we had all the lights on, and it was dead calm. There wasn't a breath of fresh air. The ship just lay there wallowing in a trough, rolling and going nowhere. I was standing my watch around the midships, and McLaren was doing his trick at the wheel. The rest of the crew was scattered around one place or another, and it was quiet as can be. Then all at once, wacko! This thing hits the deck right in front of McLaren.